You'll have to excuse me tonight because my brain is addled as a man who's just survived a botched memory implant. I'm fighting a head cold brought on by what appears to be a new ice age in New York City. Dog turds and trash are frozen like ancient artifacts in the unbroken range of solid ice that used to be our city's sidewalks. I have had Paul Verhoeven's mutants, Nazis, strippers, Robocops, and Sharon Stones yelling and kicking and shooting at me for the last 48 hours, and I feel guilty and confused all at once. I'm not sure what I did, but I must deserve it. This will be less a review than a survey of my schizophrenic state. Total Recall. I remember a time when the Korolko logo was enough to clue my overheated teenage brain that I was about to see something made of steel dripping sweat and fueled by testosterone. Confused hormonal impulses that bordered on the homoerotic concerning the well-oiled biceps of Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Power-mad fantasies of unlimited gunfire and the celery stalk crunch of necks broken. Regular swan dives ahead of blood-red flower blossom fireballs. What a fucked up weirdness were the 80s. What can you say about a decade dominated by muscular mass murderers spouting one-liners after each kill? About a decade that birthed the 90s, that age of the comedic nut kick. To enter the world of Total Recall is to enter the world of wild young boys hell-bent on mild cruelties of every stripe, of dropping bugs in girls' hair while they shower, of backwoods war games that end in bloody knees and dirty faces, in the mean-spirited pranks of the adolescent male at its most irresponsible. You either jump on board with this premise or you don't. The writer Harlan Ellison once called the makers of RoboCop mean little kids pulling the wings off butterflies and setting fire to pussycats and nailing spaniels to ironing boards. And I'd say that goes for just about everything Verhoeven has ever made. He's a fetishist, plain and simple. He loves nothing more than dirtying up pretty shiny objects of every sort. I say all this because there are some who champion Verhoeven as a closeted artist of the highest order, a clandestine satirist cloaked in mock Hollywood glitz. I'm not going to go that far. He's a smart fucker. Double major in mathematics and physics, no joke. Starship Troopers really is a parody of militarism, but it's such a convincing parody that it comes full circle and very neatly endorses the thing it tends to lampoon. Is that his fault? After all, Full Metal Jacket, made by that unequivocal sacred cow of cinema, darling little Stanley Kubrick, sent droves of young American boys to the recruiting office quoting R. Lee Ermey all the way. So even if Verhoeven is unilaterally condemning Hollywood's sexual taboos and Basic Instinct, militarism in Starship Troopers, and the American police state in RoboCop, he's certainly not failing to get his kicks along the way. What I'm trying to say is that I don't know art from a shit stain, but I know trash, and Verhoeven makes trash. Glorious trash, the best, the golden standard by which trash ought to be measured. John Waters put Showgirls at number 29 of his favorite films of all time. The very same Showgirls that won 7 initial Razzie Awards, which Verhoeven personally showed up to accept. He makes exploitation films, and for a while there, say 1987 to 1997, Hollywood was willing to foot the bill. Which brings us back to Total Recall, based famously on yet another Philip K. Dick story and, like its brethren, wildly divergent from the source material. Both versions of the story begin with the premise that a bored worker bee on Earth dreams of Mars but can't afford to go. So he buys a memory implant that will leave him with the impression he's been to Mars, as a secret agent no less, and has an adventure too big to believe. Problems arise when the memory implant appears to uncork a repressed memory of actually having been to Mars as a secret agent no less, but the question lingers throughout, is he really experiencing this, or is it a case of the memory implant gone wrong? Other than Philip Dick, maybe only Elmore Leonard is so regularly adapted for the big screen and so regularly thrashed in the process. Dick was an unstoppable idea machine. I am a devoted reader, mind you. I've spent stretches going through 3 or 4 of his books back to back, and they're like the journals of a man writing to keep from exploding. His brain worked like the bus in Speed, and he never dropped below 55 miles an hour until he keeled over dead at 53, burnt out. I count myself among those who are a virtual discipleship of Philip Dick, in constant awe and admiration that he time and again gave you the heebie-jeebies, a little thrill that you just had your mind fucked with in a subtle but jarring way. He produces in his best work the same sense of animal alarm you get when you wake up at night not knowing if someone is in the room with you. And he was a hack to boot, one of the worst prose stylists ever published. The man's books had all the editorial elegance of a 4-year-old telling you the story he's making up as he goes. I suppose such is its power, the unexpurgated record of half a brain wrestling with the other half for dominance, and hence for sanity. A hope for one side to triumph over the other, finally and for all, so that he can at last rest and be free of the questions. The ideas that flew from this conflict like firebombs from an erupting volcano were all but mere byproducts. Hollywood, of course, has spent the last 25 years meticulously cherry-picking these intimate testimonies and converting them into one shitty action movie after another. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Total Recall. but it is a Schwarzenegger picture and a Verhoeven picture, a Karolko picture. They do what they do best here, engaging an impish delight in violence and one-liners. Going back to see a sci-fi epic of the year of our Lord 1990 AD was dizzying to say the least. It brought me back to a time when a charming, overgrown Austrian boy was the top box office star of the globe, all gap-toothed grin and mountainous pecs. As a kid of that time, Arnie was like your overblown fantasy of yourself, a big kid stomping around, banging into things, always getting himself in trouble, but essentially invincible. An oafish, grinning best friend. Like I said, it was Weirdsville. In 1990, the most expensive movie then made had to be shot in Mexico City because of all the future concrete architecture. That's right, kids. Once upon a time, you had to shoot on real locations embellished by the occasional matte painting. Now, I've seen the 2012 remake of Total Recall, and it's god-awful. It reached a new benchmark for tales full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Such immeasurable resources devoted to so little. The 1990 Total Recall looks positively quaint by comparison, but it has a weirdness and charm wholly lacking in modern Hollywood epics. It's a safe, boring time in Hollywood. Everyone these days looks clipped from catalogs, pretty, shiny, androgynous mannequins going through the motions of a Hollywood machinery long oiled into a meaningless perfection. It's a fabulously moneyed intestine that shits out blockbusters like clockwork, humorless, hairless, hopeless models of profound consumption. The 1990 Total Recall was, frankly, no different, an intentional blockbuster. But it was made with attention to form, to wit, mood, and the tradition of classical filmmaking, as opposed to our contemporary tradition of MasterCard commercials and video games. Well, that about brings us to the end of this review. Like I said, my head is fucked. I am capable of boundless observation at this point, but no conclusions. It was fun watching these Verhoeven flicks. I just wish I could have been there. Tom, back to you.
Thank you. We're talking Paul Verhoeven, and we're discussing Total Recall. Billy, thanks a lot for the intro. Very well done, as always. What I would like to say is that I've always liked this movie. I've always been a fan of this movie. I think at this particular time in 1990, this is just a little bit different looking anyway than most of the pop sci-fi films that were out. I remember at the time, most science fiction films always had to have like this alien/aliens look or feel to it, where it was, very dark, very dismal, extremely claustrophobic. And Verhoeven here adapts Philip K. Dick's short story, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, and he offers a very colorful, huge two worlds that are, it's just kind of like a universe of its own, and for that I've always had to compliment Paul Verhoeven for doing something, making something look a little bit different at that time. I've always really dug that. And as far as Schwarzenegger is concerned, as foolish as he is, one thing I think the three of the one thing we need to keep in mind right here is that for some reason, every time he steps into a science fiction movie, they're really not that bad. Whether it's Terminator, I mean, Terminator's an excellent movie. I mean, an excellent movie.
That's true, but Terminator 2 is not.
I am not.
What? Wait.
Some people will
serious?
really get to really go opposite there, Joe. Where I mean,
well, I haven't seen it in years. I to be fair, I haven't seen it.
Terminator 2 was awesome. What are you talking about?
I don't have a problem with Terminator 2, but
no.
I do prefer Terminator over Terminator 2.
I haven't seen Terminator 2 in a really long time, but I do not remember. I remember it being awesome.
I don't know, the buddy machine thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're fucking comic they're fucking comic book movies for crying out loud.
I know. Well, he also, he insisted that Cameron change the script so he's not a bad guy, right. So it fits his superstar.
His good guy personality. Because as we all know, Republicans, they're the good guys.
I was 13 years old when Terminator 2 came out. It was pretty much directed straight at my cerebral cortex.
Well, there was a lot of really smart stuff in Terminator,
Absolutely.
And I think that it was just like Terminator 2 just ratcheted it. It just, I don't know, it became a dumbing down of it. A lot of what's great about what Terminator was. So it was disappointing to me when I saw it.
I think The Running Man is Schwarzenegger's greatest science fiction film.
Oh my God, yeah. Well,
God, I haven't seen it.
No, I'm being sarcastic. That was all.
You don't like? I watched Running Man recently. I think last summer, and it's so funny to me because you watch this stuff when you're a teenager, like The Running Man. I used to adore it. I mean, I saw The Running Man in the movie theater, and I used to adore it. And then you watch this stuff like 20 years later. And
I used to love it too. I remember loving it too.
I mean, there are some things that I kind of like. The fact that they're using Richard Dawson and his performance is kind of unexpected. That he's just this terrible person. But overall, it is certainly disappointing. Hey, Billy, you're a big Philip K. Dick fan. How come Hollywood has a better idea of how to name his stories than he does? Because Total Recall and Blade Runner, they really jump at you. Like those are titles you can, wow, you're like, all right, that's interesting, but we can remember it for you wholesale.
And do androids dream of electric sheep?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's this guy's problem?
You guys are probably, I think, Joe, you've read some of it, but
I've read some of it, not as much as
he
you.
Is such a bad writer, man. Like his books are almost not books. They really do feel like it's just some guy in his basement hammering away at a typewriter, and when he fills his quota, he tears the last page out and ships it to the publisher and just keeps typing, and that's the start of his next novel, But
he's great though. He's great to read though.
Yeah, so it's about his ideas, like the way he just puts ideas down, and then you sort of assemble the prose yourself, but the ideas behind it are unbelievable. Pretty much every book of his I've ever read has at least one variation on messing with your reality or your sense of reality. Mm-hmm. And I've never read anyone who did that like so consistently, and
almost all.
Yeah, and he was just amazing. There's literally no one in the 20th century who did quite what he did, Well, his titles are shit.
Let me ask you this, in your opinion, because you've read his stuff, in your humble opinion, how do Ridley Scott and Paul Verhoeven, how do they take to adapting what he has? Do they have a good finger on the pulse of what he's trying to convey to his audience?
I don't think that anyone has ever really adapted Philip Dick's story properly to sort of capture the essence of him or his world and bring it to screen. No one has really done it yet. I love Blade Runner, but it's not. It's definitely
both the story, the written story, and the film.
Yeah, actually, the book is not one of my favorite Philip Dick books, so I'm not particularly loyal to the source material anyway. The one guy who. It's funny that Richard Linklater did A Scanner Darkly, which is not really a great film to say the least. But his other animated film, what is it, Joe? Waking Life, is actually closer in spirit to Philip Dick's books than anything else that's been done, because it's very philosophical about the shifty nature of reality, So, yeah, Total Recall. The original story is just a few pages long, and the idea is really good, but the story doesn't really improve on itself after that point. So it kind of goes in this weird direction, and the movie in a weird way is kind of an improvement off of it, which owes a bit to Cronenberg. David Cronenberg wrote 5 drafts of that script. He was attached to direct in the mid-80s.
Wow, that's so funny that you said that.
I can totally see, especially the Quado character. Imagine Cronenberg getting his hands on something like that.
Yeah, he came up with that character.
Oh, wow. So this is something that's not in the short story.
The whole short story. All that happens in the short story is that the guy goes to get the memory implant. They uncork the reality that he actually is a secret agent, and they refund him half his money and send him on his way. But he, halfway home, comes back and says, hey, you guys fucked up. And they're like, yeah, we know we fucked up. And they're like, well, we got to plant a new memory to cover that one up. And then they find out that he has an even deeper reality below that, and that's the end of the story, right?
Gotcha.
So in a weird way, plot-wise, the movie's actually an improvement, and that owes a lot to David Cronenberg, because
that's awesome.
Yeah, he did about 5 drafts of it. They said that by the time it got filmed, it was up at above 40 drafts.
30.
Yeah.
like 30 drafts
Yeah.
they said on the.
Yeah, and so Cronenberg was working on it, and he, by the time he was at his fifth draft, he had this whole Mars, the mutants was his idea. The idea that the polluted air was actually creating mutants was his idea.
That is so Cronenberg-esque.
Yeah, and then one of the producers on the film said, "Hey, David, you're doing a great job, but we've realized you've created the Philip Dick version of the story." And David Cronenberg goes, "Well, isn't that what you wanted?" And they're like, "No, we want Raiders of the Lost Ark on Mars."
Oh God!
And so
God, that's
he
so
left the
crazy.
project. But my God, I would love to see a Cronenberg adaptation of
Yeah.
It's so funny, man, because in my notes when I was watching the film this time, I was like, these directors are taking Philip Dick's work, and they're generally like quiet and understated and subdued works that have like these really deep, existential undertones to them and identity crises and everything.
Yeah.
And I wrote down it would be great to see a David Cronenberg version
wrote
of a
that,
Philip
Joe?
Dick.
Yeah.
I swear to God,
Yeah.
man, I was like, it was one of the things that I
I
wrote
didn't
down
even
that I
think
had
about
no
that,
idea.
but once Billy said that, the dude had written like 4 or 5 drafts of the script initially, it's like I just immediately, I totally see it.
Yeah, well, Existenz is a little Philip K. Dick.
They've cherry picked his
Dick-esque.
stuff nonstop.
Dick-esque.
It's very dickish. Yeah, I think it's just kind of I think it's almost like a crazy coincidence. Like there's a 1 in a million chance that David Cronenberg wouldn't adapt a Philip Dick story at some
Right.
point. Like they're
Yeah, it
so
seems
made
like-
for each other. I think it's just one of those
Yeah.
weird Hollywood circumstances where he's probably been so close but so far, many times before.
It just doesn't.
It just never materializes,
Yeah,
Oh,
Billy, you
yeah.
brought up a great point too in your intro because you compared people adapting Philip K. Dick to adapting Elmore Leonard, and there's, this, Leonard was, for decades really bastardized, in film with quite a few movies, and I have read some of Leonard's stuff, and I don't think it wasn't until Get Shorty really, and where
Yeah, I feel like you get like 2 adaptations, like Get Shorty is good.
and the Rum Punch, the Tarantino's Jackie Brown, which is
The
like
Soderbergh one is amazing. What
Out of
Out
sight.
of Sight is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But you
Big
know what
fan of
else
that
is
movie.
great?
Yeah.
And it's not Elmore Leonard, typical Elmore Leonard, but 3:10 to Yuma. Both of those film versions are really close to Elmore Leonard's, and that's before he went to did his gangster.
Right,
But
that's early, yeah.
Yeah.
See what I feel like happens with these guys is that there's a bunch of guys who read, for instance, Leonard and Philip Dick, and they end up becoming filmmakers, and they try to get things moved in some way to become adapted, and it just never happens. And they finally say, "Screw it! I'm going to take the essence of these guys, and I'm going to make movies anyway, because someone needs to do these stories." So I feel like with Tarantino, his dialogue is so Elmore Leonard most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it was like he was just finally like, "Fuck it! If I can't adapt an Elmore Leonard novel, I'm sure as fuck."
Well, he did.
Well, he
actually.
did,
Well,
yeah.
he did Jackie
Yeah.
Brown, right? But in general, like even before that, his Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, they
Right.
all have
Yeah,
such
yeah, absolutely.
Leonard dialogue,
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Watching, like when I really first learned about Elmore Leonard was when I was like in my early 20s, and I saw Get Shorty, in the theater opening night. It's a year after Pulp Fiction. I'm riding the John Travolta wave, because I really did, like when Pulp Fiction came out, I was a fan of it. I saw it a few times in the theater. I was really interested in it. I was just interested in film, and this, a film like Pulp Fiction, it gets to be so big. It just, it just drew me.
Changed
It
everything.
changed everything, exactly.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't deny that. And I went to go see Get Shorty, and I'll tell you this, man, it is like to this day one of the most fun experiences I've ever had watching a movie from beginning to end, where I was just having a great time watching all of these characters come to life on screen. The way they, talk to each other was just absolutely phenomenal. And then I, doing a little, research, and trying to understand who Elmore Leonard is. And then 2 years later, Tarantino's doing, Jackie Brown. It was really, a really an interesting time for me. You know?
Yeah.
He's the fillet. He's the fillet.
Well, that's from
What is
Squid and the Whale. Yeah,
Yeah.
of crime novelists.
Yeah, he's the
He's
fillet
the
of crime
fillet of
novelists.
crime novelists.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's
with
great,
with
Joe.
these authors being adapted, you kind of get grafted, like whatever's happening in Hollywood grafted onto them, or and
Right.
it's nice to see.
They only get adapted because there's a pre-existing condition in Hollywood somewhere where
Right.
they're like, that crime movie just made $1 billion. What properties lying around that we can make $1 billion off
Yeah.
of?
So I mean, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger was riding like this monsoon tidal wave or whatever
yeah.
at the time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's the guy who actually got this going because I think it was a Dino De Laurentiis production
Yeah.
earlier, from what I understand,
Yeah.
and Jeff Bridges was slated to star in it. To be honest,
In Total Recall.
yeah, and then Dino De Laurentiis, I guess, was having financial trouble,
hard
so
to
Arnold
believe.
called him up.
Yeah.
Arnold called him up and said, "Let me have the script." And then he really loved RoboCop, and he just made it happen basically, and called up Paul Verhoeven. So what you have is like this really bare bones story that you graft whatever's like the machine of Hollywood grafts right onto it, and it's kind of neat that it happened with Paul Verhoeven. But and then jump ahead 30 years, and just like what Billy was saying in his review there, what's happening in Hollywood now gets grafted on it. You get this really good looking, perfect face to put on there in Colin Farrell, and then you get a ton of like clean, glitz grime aesthetic.
Right.
Everything looks like a Las Vegas nightclub.
But I
Yeah.
don't think that I saw, and I agree with Billy. Like the remake of Total Recall is just god awful. But all this stuff you're saying, I mean, it just disconnects me from what I'm witnessing on screen, big time. Whereas like watching, Schwarzenegger, like he's more human to me than in believe it or not, which is fucking nuts. than-
well, it's great. Yeah, well, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
which is he's more human to me than Colin Farrell. I mean.
Yeah, well, yeah, this film does feel more human. That's true, but at the
And
same
that has
so
everything to do with the man who's directing the film, for the most part.
yeah, well, sure. Well, and the machine that's pumping it out,
Right.
So
Well,
the
it's the
humanity.
same machine pumping it out, Joe.
Well, no,
That's
it's
the
not
difference.
actually. Well, that's what's so interesting about it. The machine has changed a bit,
Okay,
so
yeah.
now the machine is pumping out like these perfect CGI generated effects, and that's like kind of that's kind of grafted onto the story and robbing certain elements of the story. But in this point, by contrast, in this Total Recall version, the original, you have more of a tactile feel, like a more human feel. But what you do kind of get lost is sort of the deeper existentialist kind of subtext of the original story, so that a lot of the mental stuff and the inner conflict stuff is kind of sacrificed for kind of the brawn of the Arnold Schwarzenegger muscle character, you know what I mean? So like instead of this dude like brooding over this existential crisis of who am I and what as my life is just a farce, which is so Dixie and dickish, I guess. He's just like Billy said, just stumbling around in space. But that said, yeah, I do prefer this version a lot better. And this
You saw the 2012 version of Total Recall?
I did, but you know what? It's
How
funny
did you
is
end up seeing that?
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah,
There-
that's
there was nothing
that is
else
the
on
best
television?
question. That Billy,
What,
that's
the-
the best question that has been asked.
the 2012 version with Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
Oh, because I really love this one. That's why I
great.
went to go. Yeah, I really love this film. And so I checked it out, and it's funny. Like I see how sort of Hollywood shit out this plastic, this turd wrapped in plastic, but there's still that Philip Dick is. I just love what he does.
Yeah.
So there was still something for me to kind of grab onto at the heart of it,
Yeah.
but. Yeah, not like this, man. When I saw this film, Tom, it was when I was working. I was in high school. I guess I was 16 or 17 or
Total
something.
Recall?
Yeah,
Yeah. We were probably
1990.
in like a sophomore or junior in high school.
Yeah, so I was working at this bagel deli, and I used to be able to get into the movie theater for free,
Yeah.
because I used to give all the kids who used to work in the movie theater free bagels, so they would just let me into the movie theater. So I'd be whatever movie was coming out, I was there, and I actually sat and watched this film twice in a row when I was like
Oh,
16 or
that's
17.
awesome.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it fucking
Yeah.
blew me away, and I never did that
I
really.
mean, I
Yeah.
remember this was 1989 and 90. I'm a few years younger than you gentlemen. It was really like when the mushroom cloud went off in my head about understanding movies, and not just understanding that these things like sort of randomly showed up on my television from time to time, or that there was a mysterious place out there that you could go to and sit in seats and watch them, but it was like I really began to understand the machinery of it. Like there was a summer season, and there was,
Yes.
like there's a
Right.
rhythm to it and all this stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out in '89, and that's the first like movie trailer I have a really conscious experience of going, I'm watching this now, and in a few weeks this is going to be in the movie theaters, and then
Right. Right.
a year later it's going to be on VHS or whatever. Things move slow back then, kids.
That's right. I know. It used to take a year.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Easy.
when I saw like there was some special on TV, and I saw a movie like a summer movie preview thing going on, and they showed just like a few clips from Total Recall, and it was like I was seeing things that I could not explain to myself, like the where he takes the woman's head off, it unfolds in stages,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden this person is holding the woman's head, and she goes, "You're now get ready for a surprise," or
I
whatever it
love
is.
that. Yeah.
I was just like, I'm looking at this, and you can see, like, you could pretty much see smoke coming out of my ears as new neurons were being like fused together, like it was just unbelievable. And when I finally got to see the whole thing, I was like, every second of film, there's something insane, batshit crazy happening,
That scene where he pulls out that thing from his nose, Tom, fucking
Oh, that's
I
great.
never forgot that. It like that burned into my head indelibly. Like it just will never be gone. And it's so funny, like you were saying before, as you go back and you watch these things, and you're so aware of how or at least I'm aware of how they achieved that effect, and it's so great how they achieved that effect.
Yeah, it's like
because
real rubber latex heads
Yeah.
and shit.
yeah, but when you're not so savvy and you see that stuff, it's really, really
I
effective. It's got
remember
this
just thinking
really weird
when he was
effect.
running through the airport and he ran through that whatchamacallit,
Yeah,
that
the X-ray
the
machine.
X-ray. I remember thinking, well, it looked kind of ridiculous like watching it now, but I remember always thinking that was cool. It'd be like, it was like a scene I'd look forward to. But yeah, I mean,
Do you know what I like about this one too? Sorry, one last thing.
please.
The thing that Schwarzenegger always did right, and Verhoeven did right, and they
Right.
worked together in this movie, is self mockery.
Yeah.
Like there's scenes where Schwarzenegger, like before he pulls the thing out of his nose, he has that stupid towel wrapped around his head,
Right.
and he looks like a goofball.
Yeah.
And then he gets the thing out by yanking this thing out of his nose like a giant booger, and he looks, he doesn't look cool, right? He doesn't look slick. He
Yeah.
doesn't look like a Hollywood star. He looks like a goofball, right?
Right.
So, like the willingness to make yourself, like, the problem I feel with filmmaking right now is that it's just so cool. Everything has to. No one can look like an asshole. No one can look like a moron or a fool.
Well, you got all James Franco and Seth Rogen and all those guys making fools of
Yeah.
themselves. every
Sure,
time,
sure,
you
but
know?
it's like
But
the
no,
mainstream
you're
movie,
both
like
right. Yeah.
like Total Recall is the 2012 is completely humorless. There's no you
Oh,
could
yes,
never
yeah,
see
yeah.
Colin Farrell pulling in the giant booger. out of his
That's
head.
true.
There's
That's
nothing to
true.
latch
Right?
onto,
That is
and you're so right about that, Billy.
There's nothing human about them.
When
They're like toy figurines running around.
When I was when I was like 18, 19, when this movie was getting a ton of cable airplay, my little cousins, when I used to visit my uncle and my aunt and uncles, and my little cousins, they were like 5 or 6. They at the end of the day, like during the holiday, they would when they would have to go take their baths or showers or whatever, like my 2 little cousins, Derek and Robbie, they would always ask their dads if when they come out of the bath they could be Total Recall, and because they would want to wrap the towels like around their heads. But that's something great, and it's exactly like going on what you guys are talking about. Like, there's stuff to latch onto. And in this remake of this film, there's nothing like that. It's like you watch it and you forget about it like 10 minutes later.
Oh, well, here's a good instance too. Like the fight scene between Colin Farrell and whoever the girl is, and the fight scene between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sharon Stone.
Right.
Like the difference is so they're actually doing battle in Colin Farrell, but it feels like a video game.
Yeah.
But when he punches
they're jumping
her,
like 50, 75 feet in the air and shit.
Right.
Yeah, but
and there's no dialogue too.
Yeah.
In the remake, in this, just by like Sharon Stone when she's like hitting him, going, how much I hate this fucking planet. Like, it's just so awesome.
Yeah. And when he hits her, you really feel like, oh my God, he just hit her.
Yeah, that's a great point too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something
but
human,
I will,
you can feel the meat and bone of the actors,
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I've seen a vision as lovely as Sharon Stone in that exercise in a long time.
Well, it was funny watching that in Basic Instinct back to back.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, I forgot. Like, she was unbelievable, man.
Yeah, she was. And then she right after Basic Instinct, I mean, she had Casino and The Quick and the Dead. I mean, so she was working, with Verhoeven. She's working with Scorsese. She was working with Raimi.
Oh, speaking of Scorsese, I was just gonna say I just saw the Wall Street movie, Tom.
Awesome.
And that's some a guy who's not afraid to make his stars look foolish.
No, not at all.
The best
they
scene
do it gladly. Just
the
look
best
go
scene
to
in
hell
the
with that
movie
movie.
is the one that makes his actors look the most foolish.
Of course, you got DiCaprio. He's got the dominatrix on him with a candle in his ass. It's great.
That is insane.
So it does happen. It's just it's not going to happen in these these tailor-made.
That's it, man. Like the action movies, like it's not going to happen. Everyone has to look too cool, which is not fair. I mean, he's Verhoeven. Like in the 80s, there was all the Rambo movies and shit. Those guys couldn't look like idiots either,
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And you're right. With the Verhoeven Schwarzenegger, with them two working together, Verhoeven said that one of the first things when they began making this film, like Schwarzenegger told Verhoeven, he's just like, hey, I'm yours, whatever you want. I'm not gonna fight on you. He's like, don't be afraid to do anything with me. And you got to give Schwarzenegger a lot because, I mean, at this time, he could just throw his weight around. But
he was, Verhoeven told a story that there was, like, the studio was giving him some grief on something, and he would argue with them, and they wouldn't budge. But if Schwarzenegger asked them, they would give him whatever he wanted, right? So Schwarzenegger finally just told him, look, tell me what you want, and I'll go to the studio and say I need it. And it worked, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a generous thing, man. And it reminded me, what's his face? The old talk show host. Jack Parr used to say, it doesn't matter if I tell the joke or my guest tells the joke. What matters is that tomorrow people are going to say, wasn't the Jack Parr show great last night?
Right.
And I was like,
line,
that collaborative, like that idea of collaboration to make something good that makes everyone happy is like, that's such a good vibe, man.
Right.
Yeah, I have such a newfound respect for Schwarzenegger because this is really
go,
the first
Joe.
time
I like that's awesome.
Well, listening to the commentary for this time around, man, I never actually heard him talk like a
normal human being.
Like a regular guy. Most of my perception of him are all these comedians making fun of him,
Right.
but he seems like he's like a big kid. He sounds like even it was only a few years ago, and I guess he was talking about how he broke his finger in one of those fight scenes.
Hey, listen, it's absolutely amazing that the way he looks and the way he speaks, you have to, give this man his credit because, I mean, he became a huge star. You know?
Well, his muscles became a huge star.
I know. I know.
3 stars for the price of 1.
He's not a great actor. I mean,
I'm not saying he's a great actor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm saying you got to give him credit for accomplishing what he accomplished, man.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's
there's
no doubt about that. I mean, he was, he was an Austrian guy. He comes over here and he becomes, You know, he can't speak the language very well, you know, but yet he becomes a huge star here.
It's true. And as much as he added and he, how much he's responsible for this Total Recall, there is still things, flaws in this movie where, there's no sense of inner conflict or like self pity or whatever for like his whole life becoming, nothing but a dream where like it really could have been.
I mean, it's like he's like a pin, he's like a pinball that just got shot through the machine, right? He's just
like he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop for 1 second to be like, wow, everything that I just believed is, there's just no time even spent on that kind of stuff, which I think is kind of.
I mean, they're too busy shooting people out into the vacuum of the Martian landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for what it is for sure, but I would just love to see a Philip Dick movie.
I'm telling you, man, it drives me nuts because like. The last time I went on kind of a little binge, I read like 3 of his back to back, and by the end of it, I was like midway through the last one, and I just looked at my girlfriend. I was like, I have to put this down. Like, this is fucking with my normal life. Like, I don't trust my own front door anymore. Like he really gets in your head, and no one has really done that yet. For the movie adaptations.
Yeah. Cool. We want Cronenberg. We're going to send out a petition.
We're going to do a Kickstarter.
Hey, listen, guys. I've been waiting, 2 years now to have a discussion about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I could go on all night talking about the man. But hey, listen, I want to start wrapping the show up. It's been a long night. Do we have anything else we want to throw out there real quick about Verhoeven? Any thoughts on anything?
I don't have anything on that, but as long as Joe brought up Franco and Seth Rogen, have you guys seen This Is the End?
Yes, I did.
That is the funniest movie I've seen in
it's really funny.
Really long time, and I
love those fucking guys.
I hope we get a chance to put that on the show sometime. I saw it twice and I laughed equally hard both times. So
yeah,
I'll watch it a third time, no problem.
I mean, especially after Spring Breakers, just Franco.
We should do This Is the End and Spring Breakers.
Yeah, we should do all Franco all the time. Definitely. No, seriously, we should do. Hey, it's been a long time coming. We should do Spring Breakers. There's no doubt about that, and I wouldn't mind rewatching.
It's been requested.
Has it?
You know what's funny? Somebody was on the YouTube today, Billy, and they liked our review of Antichrist, and they were like, "Oh, you got another fascinating review." They said, and they were like, "We would love to hear you guys talk about, or I'd love to hear you guys talk about Possession."
Did you direct them to that?
Not yet. I haven't got. I'll get back.
Oh wow! And that was the first episode Max Cook was on.
Was
it?
A guest?
Possession? Yeah.
That's
We did Possession.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. So it's been re-released already. So yeah, I'll try to get that up on YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah, and don't forget, everyone, you can check us out on YouTube. Just search the Cutting Room Movie Podcast on YouTube. You can find us real easy. Plenty of our old reviews up there. You'll have a blast, man. You can just spend the whole afternoon. You could just disconnect yourself from your family, your work, or whatever, and listen to us.
You could spend a month.
You really, just enjoy the sounds of the Cutting Room Movie Podcast, man. Hey, listen, I want to thank Joe Christiana, Billy Brosson, Dave Pace for coming on, talking Paul Verhoeven. The Cutting Room Movie Podcast is brought to you by Christiana Productions and New Media Limited. The show is edited and co-produced by Joseph Schreck and produced by Thomas Detloff and Joe Christiana. You can follow us on Facebook at the Cutting Room Movie Podcast and follow me on Twitter, Thomas Detloff at TCRM Podcast. You can also check out Joe's film work at ChristianaProductions.com, Max's Bowler Hat Productions, and his Mimosa podcast show at MaxCookAndTheCounselor.com. And The Counselor's coming next week, by the way, guys. Adam Shoulder's going to be co-hosting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Music from The Cutting Room is done by the Zillatones. You can check them out at www.thezillatones.com or search for the Zillatones at ReverbNation.com. Gentlemen, we will be back next week with a new DVD release review of the 2013 Ron Howard film, Rush. Until then, we are over and we are out. Ciao.